Sometimes the loudest voice in your life isn't the world. It's the one inside your own head. That whisper that says, "You're not enough." That echo that reminds you of every mistake. That shadow that follows you even in your brightest moments. Negative self-thinking doesn't start with a scream. It starts with a sigh. It shows up when you wake up tired, look in the mirror, and feel like you're fighting something invisible. It shows up when you compare your life to others and think you're falling behind. It shows up when you're quiet, alone, and your mind becomes your own enemy. But the truth is simple. Your mind is not broken, it's untrained. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And this video series will show you how to reclaim that power. You're not here just to feel better. You're here to rebuild, to rewire, to reshape the way you speak to yourself, think about yourself, and rise above yourself. This is session 1 of your transformation. Let's begin. Negative self-thinking rarely comes from reality. It comes from habits built over years. Years of hearing criticism, comparing yourself, doubting yourself, and carrying invisible weight. But the Stoics believed something powerful. You are not what happens to you, you are what you choose to think about what happens to you. Tonight, imagine this story. A young man sits alone in a quiet apartment. He's tired, not physically but mentally. His mind feels like a battlefield where every thought is a soldier fighting against him. Whenever he tries to move forward, the same voice pulls him back. You always fail. You're not smart enough. You're not strong enough. Why even try? He hates that voice, yet he listens to it every day. One evening, he reads a line from Seneca. "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The words hit him like a punch. He realizes something. Most of the pain in his life hasn't come from events, but from the stories he tells himself about those events. That was the night he decided to change his life, not by changing the world around him, but by changing the world inside him. The next morning, he sits with a notebook and writes the first rule. "I will not believe every thought my mind produces." Because the mind is like a storyteller, sometimes wise, sometimes terrified, sometimes dramatic, but not always truthful. Epictetus taught that if you want to be free, you must learn to separate what you can control from what you can't. The young man realized he couldn't control the past, other people's opinions, or every challenge life throws at him. But he could control the way he interprets those challenges. So he writes the second rule. "I will question my thoughts, not obey them blindly." This alone started rewiring his mind. Every time a negative thought appeared, he didn't panic. He didn't accept it as truth. He simply asked, "Is this real, or is this just fear speaking?" Slowly, that inner battlefield became quieter. But transformation doesn't happen in one day. So he made a promise, a Stoic promise, to build his mind like a muscle. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal every day not because he was weak, but because he understood the importance of training the mind. The young man decided he would do the same. Every morning he sat with himself, even if it hurt, even if the thoughts were dark, even if his fears were loud, because he knew that avoiding the mind only makes it stronger, but facing it makes you stronger. He wrote the third rule. "I will treat myself with the same respect I give others." Because negative thinking grows in one place, self-neglect. He realized he had become an expert at encouraging others, but a beginner at encouraging himself. And that had to change. The more he practiced, the more a new voice started rising inside him. Quieter, calmer, but stronger. Try again. You're learning. You're growing. You're not who you were yesterday. He didn't become perfect. He became aware. And awareness is the first step toward rewiring your mind. By the end of the week, he wrote the fourth rule. "I will protect my mind the same way I protect my body." Because your mind is your home, and you deserve to live inside a peaceful one. You've taken the first step, the step of awareness. In the next sessions, we'll dive deep into the 10 rules and build a mindset that no negativity can break. The young man's journey didn't transform overnight. Real change never happens suddenly. It happens through tiny, repeated choices that slowly reshape the mind. After writing his first 4 rules, he felt something unusual, a sense of control he hadn't experienced in years. Not control over the world, not control over outcomes, but control over his inner dialogue, the one place where the real war had always been fought. He woke up early the next morning. His room was still dark, the sky barely turning blue. He sat on the edge of his bed and took a long breath. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like space. Space to think, space to grow, space to rebuild. He opened his notebook and wrote Rule 5. "I will not speak to myself in ways I would never speak to someone I love." Negative self-thinking often comes disguised as realism. People say, "I'm just being honest with myself," or "I know my limits." But the Stoics would challenge that. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its habitual thoughts. Meaning, if you repeatedly tell yourself that you're worthless, weak, or behind, then that becomes the color of your entire life. The young man realized he'd been painting his inner world with the darkest colors, not because they were true but because they were familiar. He remembered something he once heard. If you criticize a plant, it doesn't grow. If you nurture it, it flourishes. So why, he wondered, had he spent years criticizing himself? He closed his eyes and allowed the questions to sink in. For the first time, he saw that his self-talk wasn't tough love. It was emotional sabotage disguised as discipline. That morning, he decided to change the way he talked to himself. Not with fake positivity or forced affirmations, but with simple honesty. If he failed, he wouldn't say, "You're useless." He'd say, "You're learning." If he struggled, he wouldn't say, "You're weak." He'd say, "You're trying." This wasn't delusion, it was truth. And truth is the foundation of mental strength. As the day began, he walked outside. The air was cold, sharp, almost cleansing. He noticed how easy it was for negative thoughts to sneak in when you're not paying attention. A small mistake could become a whole internal storm if you let it. But he was learning something essential. Your mind takes the shape of what you repeatedly allow. So he gave himself a new daily task: to catch negative thoughts the moment they appeared. Not to fight them, not to suppress them, but to observe them like clouds passing through the sky. This was Rule 6. I will observe my thoughts without attaching myself to them. The Stoics practiced this constantly. They believed that the mind becomes free when you learn to separate thought from identity. A negative thought doesn't mean you're a negative person. A moment of fear doesn't mean you're a coward. A mistake doesn't mean you're a failure. Thoughts are temporary events, not permanent definitions. Later that afternoon, while sitting in a crowded cafe, he watched people moving around, each carrying invisible worlds inside them. Everyone looked normal, but he knew many were fighting the same hidden battle. The battle between who they are and what their thoughts tell them they are. He smiled, not out of arrogance but out of understanding. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone. Everyone has doubts. Everyone has fears. Everyone has insecurities. The difference lies in who listens to them and who learns to rise above them. He wrote Rule 7. I will replace comparison with gratitude. Comparison is one of the most powerful triggers of negative self-thinking. The Stoics warned about this centuries ago. They taught that comparing your life to others is a direct path to misery because you're measuring your reality against someone else's highlight reel. The young man had spent years believing others were ahead, more successful, more confident, more disciplined. But he never considered how many silent battles they were fighting, ones he couldn't see. He looked down at his notebook and wrote one more thing. I will appreciate my journey without wishing for someone else's. That sentence alone felt like breathing clean air after years of suffocation. Night came quickly. He sat by his window watching the streetlights flicker. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of progress. Slow, quiet, invisible progress, but progress nonetheless. But there was one more rule he needed to write that night. He remembered the teachings of Epictetus, who said, circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him. The young man realized something profound. Negative self-thinking isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of untrained perception. And perception can be trained, sharpened, strengthened. So he wrote Rule 8. I will reshape my perception before I judge my life. Because once you change the lens, the world looks different. Your past looks different. Your future looks possible. And your present feels manageable. He closed the notebook gently, feeling lighter, clearer, more grounded. He wasn't healed. He wasn't transformed. But he was becoming aware, and awareness is the birthplace of change. The young man's journey didn't transform overnight. Real change never happens suddenly. It happens through tiny, repeated choices that slowly reshape the mind. After writing his first 4 rules, he felt something unusual, a sense of control he hadn't experienced in years. Not control over the world, not control over outcomes, but control over his inner dialogue, the one place where the real war had always been fought. He woke up early the next morning. His room was still dark, the sky barely turning blue. He sat on the edge of his bed and took a long breath. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt like space. Space to think, space to grow, space to rebuild. He opened his notebook and wrote Rule 5. I will not speak to myself in ways I would never speak to someone I love. Negative self-thinking often comes disguised as realism. People say, I'm just being honest with myself, or, I know my limits. But the Stoics would challenge that. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its habitual thoughts. Meaning, if you repeatedly tell yourself that you're worthless, weak, or behind, then that becomes the color of your entire life. The young man realized he'd been painting his inner world with the darkest colors, not because they were true but because they were familiar. He remembered something he once heard. If you criticize a plant, it doesn't grow. If you nurture it, it flourishes. So why, he wondered, had he spent years criticizing himself? He closed his eyes and allowed the questions to sink in. For the first time, he saw that his self-talk wasn't tough love. It was emotional sabotage disguised as discipline. That morning, he decided to change the way he talked to himself. Not with fake positivity or forced affirmations, but with simple honesty. If he failed, he wouldn't say, "You're useless." He'd say, "You're learning." If he struggled, he wouldn't say, "You're weak." He'd say, "You're trying." This wasn't delusion, it was truth. And truth is the foundation of mental strength. As the day began, he walked outside. The air was cold, sharp, almost cleansing. He noticed how easy it was for negative thoughts to sneak in when you're not paying attention. A small mistake could become a whole internal storm if you let it. But he was learning something essential. Your mind takes the shape of what you repeatedly allow. So he gave himself a new daily task: to catch negative thoughts the moment they appeared. Not to fight them, not to suppress them, but to observe them like clouds passing through the sky. This was Rule 6. I will observe my thoughts without attaching myself to them. The Stoics practiced this constantly. They believed that the mind becomes free when you learn to separate thought from identity. A negative thought doesn't mean you're a negative person. A moment of fear doesn't mean you're a coward. A mistake doesn't mean you're a failure. Thoughts are temporary events, not permanent definitions. Later that afternoon, while sitting in a crowded cafe, he watched people moving around, each carrying invisible worlds inside them. Everyone looked normal, but he knew many were fighting the same hidden battle. The battle between who they are and what their thoughts tell them they are. He smiled, not out of arrogance but out of understanding. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone. Everyone has doubts. Everyone has fears. Everyone has insecurities. The difference lies in who listens to them and who learns to rise above them. He wrote Rule 7. I will replace comparison with gratitude. Comparison is one of the most powerful triggers of negative self-thinking. The Stoics warned about this centuries ago. They taught that comparing your life to others is a direct path to misery because you're measuring your reality against someone else's highlight reel. The young man had spent years believing others were ahead, more successful, more confident, more disciplined. But he never considered how many silent battles they were fighting, ones he couldn't see. He looked down at his notebook and wrote one more thing. I will appreciate my journey without wishing for someone else's. That sentence alone felt like breathing clean air after years of suffocation. Night came quickly. He sat by his window watching the streetlights flicker. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of progress. Slow, quiet, invisible progress, but progress nonetheless. But there was one more rule he needed to write that night. He remembered the teachings of Epictetus, who said, circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him. The young man realized something profound. Negative self-thinking isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of untrained perception. And perception can be trained, sharpened, strengthened. So he wrote Rule 8. I will reshape my perception before I judge my life. Because once you change the lens, the world looks different. Your past looks different. Your future looks possible. And your present feels manageable. He closed the notebook gently, feeling lighter, clearer, more grounded. He wasn't healed. He wasn't transformed. But he was becoming aware. The morning of session 4 arrived with a different kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence that used to weigh on his chest, but a stillness that felt earned. A stillness born from effort, from awareness, from choosing himself day after day. The young man woke up slowly, stretching his arms as sunlight slipped gently through the blinds. He sat at the edge of his bed and realized something powerful. For the first time in years, he didn't wake up dreading his thoughts. He woke up meeting them. That alone was a victory. But victories in the mind are fragile. They need protection, they need repetition, and they need daily reinforcement. He knew this. The Stoics knew this. And today he would learn how to turn his 10 rules into a living, breathing practice. He lit a small candle on his desk, something he had started doing recently. The flame reminded him of his mind. Small, flickering, but capable of lighting an entire room if protected correctly. He opened his notebook. 10 rules stared back at him. 10 reminders of the person he was becoming. But today he asked himself a deeper question. How do I turn these rules into a lifestyle? Anyone can write rules. Anyone can read inspirational quotes. But the transformation happens when actions align with awareness. He wrote at the top of a fresh page, applying the rules. He began with Rule 1, not believing every thought. He remembered yesterday, the familiar negative voice that appeared, then faded when he questioned it. That moment taught him something essential. Thoughts lose power when you refuse to panic. He wrote, I will respond to thoughts, not react to them. This became his first practice. Later that morning, he went to a small cafe he liked. Warm lights, quiet music, and the scent of roasted coffee beans mixing with the soft hum of people talking. He sat by the window, pulled out his notebook again, and reviewed Rule 7, replacing comparison with gratitude. A group of people sat nearby, laughing, showing each other photos, planning vacations. The younger version of him would have felt like an outsider, like he was missing something, like everyone else was living a better life. But today he felt something different. He felt grounded. He didn't want their life. He didn't want their path. He wanted his own, with all its imperfections, lessons, and slow growth. He whispered to himself, I'm grateful for where I am and who I'm becoming. And he meant it. Gratitude wasn't a moment, it was a shift in perception. It wasn't, I wish I had what they have. It was, I'm thankful for what I've got and what I'm building. He wrote the sentence down, underlining it twice. As the day continued, another challenge presented itself, something he didn't expect. He received a message from someone he used to know, someone who had criticized him harshly in the past. Just seeing their name on the screen brought back memories he wasn't proud of. The insecurity, the self-doubt, the quiet shame. Old wounds, old triggers, old patterns. And just like that, his mind tried to pull him back into the familiar storm. Maybe they were right about you. Maybe you haven't changed at all. For a moment, he felt that familiar tightening in his chest. But then he remembered Rule 10, not letting old wounds create new thoughts. He closed his eyes, inhaled slowly, and said to himself, that was then. This is now. He didn't reply to the message. Not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Walking away from old wounds is not weakness. It is strength. It is choosing peace over validation. It is choosing growth over reopening scars. He stood up from his chair, walked outside, and let the cold air hit his face. It felt refreshing. It felt cleansing. It felt like a reset. The Stoics taught that external situations don't define your peace. Your interpretation does. He realized that today was one of those days where the mind quietly tests you, checking if you truly mean what you say, checking if you practice what you write. He did. And that realization made him stronger. As evening approached, he returned home and sat by his window again. The candle from the morning had melted halfway, but the flame still burned, unwavering, steady, resilient. Just like he was becoming. He flipped through his notebook and saw the 10 rules once more. But now they no longer looked like statements. They looked like commitments. Each one carrying a weight, a meaning, a future. He whispered softly, these are not rules, these are reminders of who I want to be. And with that awareness, he wrote at the bottom of the page, rewiring my mind is not a task, it's a lifestyle. He closed the notebook gently, placed it on the table, and leaned back. The city outside glowed with evening lights, people moving like shadows with their own silent battles. He knew he wasn't alone, and he knew he wasn't the same person he was when this journey started. He wasn't perfect, he wasn't done, but he was becoming unbreakable, one thought, one rule, one moment at a time. The next day began differently, not with a surge of motivation, not with excitement, but with a quiet steadiness. The young man woke up and felt something that most people overlook: stability. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was simply the feeling of standing on solid mental ground after years of walking on emotional sand. He sat at his desk, notebook open, pen in hand. The candle's flame flickered beside him like a small symbol of consistency. He had realized something important over the last few days. Rewiring the mind is not about one big breakthrough. It's about small, consistent adjustments that slowly shift your entire inner world. Today he wanted to understand the deeper layers of negative self-thinking, the layers hidden beneath the surface, the ones that don't shout but whisper, the ones that guide your behavior without you even realizing. He asked himself, where do these thoughts hide? He knew they weren't always loud. Sometimes they hid in hesitation, in overthinking, in procrastination, in the fear of trying, in the fear of failing, and sometimes in the fear of succeeding. Most people think negative self-thinking is only about harsh inner dialogue, but he realized it also shows up in the decisions you don't make, the chances you don't take, and the life you don't pursue because the voice inside you says you're not ready. He wrote on the page, negative thinking thrives in silence. Meaning, when you don't question it, it grows. When you don't challenge it, it spreads. When you avoid your inner world, it becomes the dictator of your actions. He thought of something Marcus Aurelius said: "You must build your life action by action." That line gave him clarity. If negative thinking hides in hesitation, then healing hides in action. So he chose a new practice for the day, doing one thing he normally avoids because of fear or self-doubt. It didn't have to be big. It just had to challenge the voice inside him. He looked around his room. His eyes fell on a project he had abandoned months ago, something he wanted to start but never did because the voice in his head said it wasn't good enough. The notebook sat on a shelf, untouched, collecting dust. He pulled it down, placed it on the table, and stared at it for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Today I choose action." He opened the notebook and began writing. The words felt slow at first, uncertain, shaky, but they were there. He was moving. He was trying. He was reclaiming territory inside his own mind. He realized something powerful as he wrote. Action weakens doubt. Inaction feeds it. Every sentence he wrote felt like a small punch to the old version of himself. Every line was a reminder that improvement doesn't require perfection, just courage. Hours passed without him noticing. The young man looked up from the pages and felt something unfamiliar. Pride. Not ego. Not arrogance. But the quiet pride that comes from doing something you once believed you couldn't. He closed the notebook gently, exhaling deeply. That one action changed the tone of his entire day. Later in the evening, he went outside for a walk. The air was cool, the sky dimming into shades of orange and purple. He listened to the sounds of the city, footsteps, distant conversations, the rhythmic noise of life happening around him. He reflected on another truth he had recently discovered. Negative thinking is not always emotional. Sometimes it's habitual, a default setting, a familiar pattern. And like any habit, it can be replaced, but not by force, by awareness, by practice, by repetition. As he walked, he repeated a sentence in his mind: "I am not my old patterns." He knew he had spent too many years believing that his past defined his future. But the Stoics taught that every moment is a fresh decision. Every thought is a chance to shift direction. Every action is an opportunity to break an old cycle. He stopped near a small bridge overlooking a quiet river. The water moved slowly, reflecting the fading sky. He thought about how the river doesn't resist obstacles. It flows around them. It adapts. It moves forward. And eventually, it shapes the landscape. He realized he wanted to be like that, fluid, adaptable, steady. Not someone who lets negative thinking freeze him, but someone who lets awareness guide him. He leaned on the railing, letting the cool metal steady him. For a moment, he simply breathed. And in that breath, he made a decision. A decision that surprised even him. He wasn't just going to try to stop negative thinking. He was going to build a mind so strong, so clear, so aligned with truth that negative thoughts would no longer have a home inside him. Not because he suppressed them, but because he outgrew them. He whispered softly into the wind, "I'm becoming someone I can trust." And that was the turning point. He walked home slowly, feeling lighter. Not because life had changed, but because he had changed. His awareness had sharpened. His discipline had strengthened. His inner world had started shifting in ways he never imagined possible. That night, as he blew out the candle on his desk, he understood something profound. Rewiring the mind isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming aware enough to catch the lies, patient enough to replace them, and strong enough to build a new identity. And he was doing exactly that. The following day, he woke up with a sense of quiet strength. Not confidence, that comes later. Not certainty, that comes with time. But strength, the kind that builds when you spend enough days choosing awareness over autopilot. He sat up slowly, feeling the morning light touch his face, and realized something subtle but important. His mind wasn't attacking him the way it used to. The negative thoughts were still there, but weaker, slower, less convincing. It wasn't because they had disappeared. It was because he had stopped surrendering to them. He walked to his desk, lit the candle, and opened his notebook. He had written plenty of truths over the past few days, but today he wanted to explore something deeper, the hidden root beneath negative self-thinking: identity. He wrote on the page, "You think negatively about yourself when you don't know yourself." That realization hit him harder than anything else. So much of his negative inner dialogue came from carrying identities that weren't his. Old labels, old roles, old memories, old versions of himself that no longer matched the person he was becoming. He had inherited beliefs about himself from people who barely understood their own minds. From moments of failure he never forgave himself for. From comparisons he made when he didn't know his own strengths. From assumptions he accepted because questioning them seemed exhausting. He whispered to himself, "I'm not who I used to be." The Stoics believed that identity is fluid, shaped by choices, guided by values, and strengthened by action. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The young man finally understood. He had been dyed by old thoughts for too long. Today he wanted to choose new colors. He wrote, "Identity is a daily decision." After finishing that line, he stepped outside for a walk. The streets were quieter than usual, the morning air crisp and energizing. As he walked, he noticed something important about the people around him. Everyone was carrying invisible battles. Everyone was dealing with thoughts they'd never say out loud. Everyone had moments of self-doubt, insecurity, fear, hesitation. The difference wasn't in who had these thoughts, it was in who let them control their life. He wasn't going to let them control his anymore. As he turned a corner, he remembered something Epictetus taught. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. He realized most of his worst thoughts never came true. The fears he lived with were mental predictions, not real events. The criticism he imagined was rarely spoken. The rejection he feared was never guaranteed. He had lived more inside imaginary pain than actual pain. He paused and whispered, "I won't suffer imaginary losses anymore." By the time he reached a small park, he felt a kind of mental clarity he hadn't felt before. He sat on a wooden bench beneath a tree shedding golden leaves. The moment felt symbolic, old things falling away, making space for something new. He pulled out his notebook and wrote something new at the top of the page. Transforming the inner voice. He wanted to study how his inner voice actually worked, so he listened closely. In the quiet of the park, he heard it, not loud, not harsh, but distant. "Be careful, what if you fail?" He didn't ignore it. He didn't fight it. He didn't shame himself for hearing it. Instead, he replied to it in his mind with a calm strength. "I will fail sometimes. But failure is not a personality." That was something he had never told himself before. He realized negative self-thinking didn't always attack his abilities. Sometimes it attacked his identity. It made him believe that failing made him a failure, that struggling made him weak, that not knowing meant he was incapable. But the truth is simpler. Failure is a moment, not a definition. Doubt is a feeling, not a label. Fear is a signal, not a prophecy. He wrote, "My inner voice is not the enemy. It's just untrained." When he finally stood up and began walking again, he felt lighter, not because life was easier, but because he was no longer interpreting everything through the filter of self-criticism. As he walked home, he made another silent commitment. Whenever a negative thought appeared, he would answer with a question. Not aggression, not denial, but curiosity. Is this thought true? Where did this belief come from? Would I say this to someone I love? Is this thought helping me grow or holding me back? By the time he reached his door, he understood something profound. Most negative beliefs collapse the moment you question them honestly. Later in the evening, he lit his candle again and sat by the window. The quiet glow filled the room with warmth. He picked up his notebook and wrote at the bottom of the page, "Rewiring my mind is not about fighting myself. It's about teaching myself." He closed the notebook gently. He wasn't done. He wasn't fully healed. But he was becoming someone with clarity, awareness, and inner discipline. He was becoming someone he could trust. Someone who no longer believed every dark thought that passed through his mind. And that shift was rewriting his entire identity. There comes a time in every person's life when the war isn't outside, it's inside. It's not between you and the world, it's between you and the voice that whispers, "You're not enough." If you listen to it long enough, it becomes your identity. But if you confront it, truly look it in the eyes, you discover something surprising. It was never your enemy. It was a scared version of you asking for direction. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." That line isn't philosophical poetry. It's a warning. If you let self-doubt dominate your inner world, everything you touch becomes poisoned with hesitation. But if you decide, just once, to give that doubt a different meaning, you unlock a different level of life. After the night Jonah faced the weight of his memories, the struggles of his past, and the noise of his thoughts, he woke up with a different presence. Not healed, not completely okay, but more aware. And awareness is the first weapon against negative self-thinking. He walked outside early in the morning, cold air breathing against his skin, and he stood near the edge of the old wooden balcony behind the cabin. The mountains were quiet, the kind of quiet that forces you to listen to yourself. And Jonah realized he had never learned how to talk to himself, only how to talk against himself. That was rule number 7 forming inside him without him even noticing. Negative self-talk can only survive if you never challenge it. But the moment you start asking questions, doubt loses power. He remembered something his father told him long ago. Never let your mind push you around. At the time, Jonah laughed. How do you stop your own mind? But now, standing alone with nothing but the echo of his breath, he understood. You don't overpower your mind. You redirect it. He closed his eyes and the same old thoughts came back. You're not enough. You're behind everyone. You're wasting your life. You're not strong like others. You're always going to be this way. But instead of shrinking, he answered them. Not enough compared to who? Behind what timeline? Wasting life according to whose definition? And why do you assume my story is already written? The more he questioned the voice, the weaker it felt. Like a storm losing momentum. Self-doubt thrives on vague beliefs, foggy fears that feel real because you never put them under a light. Once you examine them, they break apart. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Jonah was beginning to understand that his suffering wasn't coming from life. It was coming from the invisible script he had accepted without even reading it. He walked down the steps of the cabin, touched the old railing, and whispered something to himself. Not loud, not dramatic, just honest. I'm not broken. I'm undeveloped. That sentence shifted something inside him. Because when you say, I'm broken, you lock yourself into a final identity. But when you say, I'm undeveloped, you give yourself permission to grow. He realized the truth Stoics had been teaching for centuries. Self-doubt isn't a problem. Directionlessness is. When the mind has no destination, doubt becomes the default path. So Jonah made a small promise to himself. Every time I feel doubt, I will respond with direction. Not motivation. Not positivity. Direction. Something as simple as, I don't know if I can do this, but I will try for 10 minutes. Or, I don't know the whole path, but I know the next step. Or even, I'm scared, but I'm moving anyway. This wasn't inspirational talk. This was survival. Negative thinking doesn't disappear by force. It disappears by replacing aimlessness with clarity. When you give your mind a job, it stops torturing you. When you give it direction, it stops drowning you in fear. Jonah walked toward the trail that surrounded the cabin. The sun slowly rose behind the mountains, coloring the sky in soft orange. He felt the soil under his shoes, the cold wind brushing his face, and a strange sense of control. Not over life, but over himself. Every step became a sentence. Every breath became a decision. Every moment became a direction. And for the first time, Jonah felt something rare. He felt like he could trust himself again. That's the real purpose of rule number 7. Self-trust is built in moments when you move despite doubt. It's built when you stop arguing with fear and start telling it where you're going. The world doesn't change. Your circumstances don't magically shift, but something inside you reorganizes. And suddenly, the negative thoughts that used to crush you can't even touch you. Jonah reached a quiet part of the trail and paused. He looked at the sky, took a deep breath, and whispered, I'm not here to fight myself anymore. I'm here to lead myself. And that became the foundation of his transformation. Because when you stop being at war with yourself, you finally gain the strength to win the wars outside. There is a moment in every transformation when the noise finally settles. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become clearer. Jonah didn't arrive at this moment instantly. He walked through storms, shadows, guilt, and doubt. But on the final morning inside that isolated cabin, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. The sense that he could choose who he wanted to be. The mind becomes dangerous the moment you forget you have this choice. Negative self-thinking grows when you accept your thoughts as commands instead of opinions. When you see anxiety as identity instead of interference. But the Stoics taught a different truth. Your thoughts are visitors, not rulers. You decide who stays. As the last dawn rose over the mountains, Jonah sat at the edge of the old wooden deck, holding a notebook he had barely touched during the past week. The pages were empty, not because he had nothing to write, but because he had carried too much silence inside him. Silence that came from fear. Silence that came from confusion. Silence that came from avoiding uncomfortable truths. But today that silence felt different, lighter, almost helpful. The kind of silence that asks you to listen, not hide. He opened the notebook and wrote the first sentence with steady hands. Who am I choosing to be? It wasn't a question for philosophy books. It was a question for survival. Because identity is the strongest weapon against negative thinking. When you know who you're becoming, your thoughts align with that direction. When you don't, your thoughts wander into fear by default. Seneca once wrote, If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. Jonah had spent years drifting, letting doubt become his compass. But now he understood what Seneca meant. Clarity is peace. Identity is armor. Negative thinking had only survived in him because he had let it narrate his story. But now he was ready to take the pen back. So Jonah wrote 3 simple identity statements. Nothing poetic, nothing unrealistic. I am someone who shows up even when I don't feel ready. I am someone who speaks to myself with honesty, not hostility. I am someone who grows at my own pace, not society's timeline. These weren't affirmations. They were commitments. A declaration of who he wanted to be, not what he hoped magically to become. The difference is everything. Affirmations try to convince you. Identity shapes you. Jonah knew that negative self-talk would return in the future. The brain loves old patterns. They feel safe even when they're toxic. But now he had something he never had before, a chosen identity. And when you have identity, doubt loses its authority. He stood up from the deck and walked back into the cabin. For the first time, the place didn't feel like a refuge. It felt like a mirror. A place that had forced him to confront himself, challenge himself, and reveal the parts of him he had ignored. He walked to the small wooden table where a dusty mirror hung above a cracked cup. He looked at his reflection, not perfectly rested, not magically transformed, but alive, present, awake. And he whispered something he had never whispered to himself without flinching. I am worth becoming. Those words didn't erase his past. They didn't delete the mistakes, the regrets, the failures. But they did something better. They reframed them. Every setback became a lesson. Every fear became a message. Every negative thought became an opportunity to redirect the mind. This was rule number 8, shaping itself in real time. Choose identity over anxiety. Choose direction over confusion. Choose growth over shame. Choose becoming over remembering. Jonah packed his bag slowly, feeling the weight of the past week in every movement. When he closed the cabin door behind him, he paused, not to say goodbye but to acknowledge the person who had walked in here scared, lost, and overwhelmed, and the person who was now walking out. On the path down the hill, the morning breeze brushed against him softly. He felt lighter, not because life had changed but because he had. The old negative thoughts tried to return. You'll fall back again. You'll lose focus. You're not strong enough to maintain this. But for the first time, Jonah didn't fight them. He simply answered, that's not who I am anymore. Identity over anxiety. When he reached the end of the trail, he saw his car parked exactly where he had left it. A symbol of the life he would return to, same responsibilities, same challenges, same uncertainties, but a different driver behind the wheel. Jonah sat inside the car, turned the key, and looked at the road ahead. And he knew, deep inside, that negative thoughts would still try to whisper. But now he had something stronger than silence, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. He had identity. He had direction. He had himself again. And that was enough to rewrite his entire life.